All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to December 10th, 2025 CDBG office hours. Let me remember how to do this. It's been a little while. You can ask a question in the office hours. Use the Q&A chat bubble to submit a question to the team. You can ask anonymously or leave your information so that we know who it is. We're going to read the questions after the presentation, and all the questions will be saved as part of the public record. Program updates and reminders. Did you know that applicants may request up to 7% of total funding for general administration costs, plus 17% of annual PI receipts for GA costs as applicable? HUD has released a low and moderate income summary data based on the 2016 and 2020 American Community Survey. As of August 1st, 2024, LMA activities must use the new data to qualify for CDBG funds. Reminder, the 2025 NOFA amendment opens the application portal February 2nd, 2026. Application deadline is now April 3rd, 2026. CDBG trainings are required and located on our HCD YouTube CDBG workshops and trainings playlist. Our tentative 2025 CDBG NOFA timeline is it was released September 30th. Our submission portal opens February 2nd. As I said, application deadline is April 3rd. Award letters are expected to be signed September 2026, and our standard agreement execution is on a rolling basis starting October 2026. And then the expenditure deadline, of course, is 2 years and 9 months from that point. For the 2025 NOFA, we've had two NOFA webinar sessions and a NEPA webinar session. Those will be available on our YouTube. But there is one more webinar that's planned live, and that's going to be the application and budget webinar to demo our 2025 application. So that's going to be on Tuesday, January 20th, 2026. And you can register. If one of my lovely coworkers could put that link into the chat, that would be amazing. And then we have our additional 2025 CDBG NOFA resources available on our CDBG HCD website. Next, I'm going to review our questions and answers from the September office hours. First, will you be hosting office hours meetings more frequently once the NOFA is released? That no additional office hours will be held. Live and recorded webinars are being developed for 2025 NOFA, as we just discussed. To stay informed, please ensure you are subscribed to the listserv or reach out to CDBG inbox at cdbg@hcd.ca.gov. In the 2025-2029 Con Plan, HCD stated that engineering and design costs could be included as pre-award costs. Can those and the NEPA costs be included even when applying to use program income? Engineering and design costs may be considered eligible pre-award costs for both grant-funded and program income-funded awards. The following conditions must be met, so the cost has to be reasonable and necessary for the project. The activity, including the NEPA review, must be compliant with federal regs, 2 CFR 200 and 24 CFR Part 570. The local jurisdiction must follow proper procurement and documentation requirements, and the pre-award costs must be clearly identified and justified in the application. While the Con Plan supports the inclusion of such costs, HCD strongly encourages applicants to consult directly with CDBG at cdbg@hcd.ca.gov to confirm eligibility for specific projects. If a consultant assisted with the development of a CDBG grant application, is that consultant eligible to competitively apply to implement grant activities? So a consultant may still be eligible to competitively apply to implement grant activities as long as the procurement is competitive and follows to CFR 200. No unfair advantage is given due to their prior involvement, and the process is transparent and well documented to avoid conflicts of interest. And for specific guidance, you can refer to our 2025 CDBG NOFA and federal procurement rules. How much money is available, presumably for 2025? Approximately 27 million in funding is available through the CDBG program for the 2025 funding year. Since the NEPA and design plans typically carry the longest lead times, can you let us know if these items will be a threshold this year, or will this be a point getter now that it's competitive? For that, please refer to the 2025 NOFA, which explains all of the threshold items and initial requirements. They're also, some of them are listed here on screen. Is the 50% expenditure rule of open grants a requirement for eligibility to apply? So all 2025 CDBG NOFA applications must meet the 50% rule. Could you please repeat the checklist of items not included in PI? I wrote down GA, planning, non-contracted. So there are limitations to spending program income, as detailed in our CDBG program income policy. It's located on our website. The PI must be used under a standard agreement at all times. Cannot be used for general administration of non-contracted activities. And PI cannot be used for planning and public service activities. What is the expected NOFA release date? So we did release the NOFA on September 30th, 2025. And as we've said a couple times, it opens on February 2nd and closes April 3rd. For an open grant with less than 50% expenditure, can an application still be submitted for a different activity? An applicant with an open grant that has expended less than 50% of its funds may still submit a new application for a different activity. Please reach out to our inbox for activity, specific questions, and 50% rule applicability. My jurisdiction received an email regarding an RLF certification and had some previously submitted receipting and reporting financial reports rejected with a note saying they need to be emailed. Are those two items, the RLF certification and the rejected reports, related? Trying to determine how to proceed. For this item, we're recommending that you reach out to our lovely Michael Phillips at michael.phillips@hcd.ca.gov for additional PI information. When is the next scheduled office hours? So our next office hours will be, excuse me, March 11th, 2026, and we will be posting a registration link for the 2026 office hours in our chat at some point in our today. The webinars were required in the past. Are they required for each applying jurisdiction to attend? Yes, the webinars are required for each applying jurisdiction. Attendance ensures that all applicants receive the necessary guidance and updates related to the application process and program requirements. Please refer to the 2025 CDBG NOFA. Has there been awards issued on the most recent CDBG applications? Yes, CDBG has issued awards for the 2024 NOVA applications. CDBG reps change. How do we know who is our current rep and how do we find contact info? CDBG reps may change from time to time. To find out who your current assigned representative is and obtain their contact information, please contact our CDBG inbox. Next, I'm going to pass it over to Felicity Gosser to discuss our method of distribution for 2026.
Thanks, Tanner. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today on office hours. It's nice to be here with everyone. It's been a while. I wanted to open the floor kind of for the rest of the office hours session to receive feedback in the chat, or in actually Q&A is better because we are able to track and record those answers. They stay recorded. So if you have feedback or questions you want to give live during this, as I'm talking or after I'm finished with presenting, please do it in the Q&A. If you also can provide feedback by emailing us at cdbg@hcd.ca.gov. And what I want to talk about with you today is the proposed method of distribution for 2026. So this is our framework that will govern the 2026 notice of funding availability. And we are proposing some significant changes in response to various factors. And so before we finalize what goes into the method of distribution, we want to hear from all of you. And hopefully my presentation will also help you to understand the why behind the changes that we're making, and help, and because they are different, and they may feel a little uncomfortable, but I think overall they will help us to improve our customer service, provide technical assistance, to broaden the array of potential grantees, and help all of you to focus on expenditures, and do a little bit more strategic planning around what you apply for without scrambling to apply year over year, so that you're not missing out on opportunities. It also is responsive to the limited allocations of CDBG funds, as well as limited allocations of other state resources and federal resources that may limit your ability to apply for infrastructure dollars from other sources. That's what we've been hearing, and that's what this is also in response to. And so I'll just go, what I'm going to do is go ahead and go through the method of distribution. This was also sent out to our listserv, the listserv that is used in office hours. So if you're registered for office hours, you should have received this exact same information that I'm going to present in an email format, and you can reply to the CDBG inbox if you prefer to, put your thoughts together in writing and send them in that way. I'm also happy to have conversations with folks if you have specific concerns. So, and the best way to do that, again, is email the CDBG inbox and email me, and I'll set up a time for us to have a conversation, because my availability to respond to an impromptu phone call is kind of limited. So I just want to make sure I can make the space, make myself available over the coming couple weeks. All right. So as I mentioned, the CDBG team is in the process of preparing our 2026 annual action plan. That is an update to the 5-year con plan, which always includes what we call the method of distribution, which is what governs what we put into our annual NOFA. So we are proposing some significant changes in the way funds are going to be distributed that result from reduced congressional appropriations, increased project costs, feedback that we've received from grantee, data on closeouts, and an ongoing effort to streamline our program so we can provide improved outcomes in customer service. So these changes do include in anticipated available funding. We're assuming level funding with what we received this year in 2025 at $27 million. And we plan to have our award method be a return to over-the-counter, first come, first serve basis for shovel-ready projects, to kind of counteract the impact of over-the-counter, which makes our sort of highest capacity consultant-assisted applicants able to always apply first. We do have some set-asides as well as some additional limitations on who can apply. So we plan to put a set-aside for up to 2 awards for grantees who have not been awarded in the last 5 NOFA cycles. So if you haven't received any award from 2021 to 2025, you will be able to be eligible for that set-aside. Again, and 5% of funds, as always, under federal statute, will be set aside for Colonias. That's always the case in our NOFAs because it is federally required. And then what is state required under state statute is that 1.25% of funds are set aside for non-federally recognized tribes. And the Colonias will be able to apply for planning, infrastructure, or housing activities. Non-federally recognized tribes will be able to apply for any eligible activity as it is allowed under the 2025 consolidated plan. and that's to adhere with state statutes that limit us. Thanks, Tanner. The other changes are that we are going to make changes to the CDBG guidelines, so that those changes will happen in probably February or March. You'll see a public comment process come out for those. But the substantial change there is that we are going to make the 50% rule applicable to over-the-counter awarded activities. Right now, it is only applicable to competitive awarded activities. And in order to make sure that we are able to make awards to a variety of grantees, we have 154 eligible grantees across the state of California, and we do have many applicants who come in repeatedly. And this is to make sure that we are able to spread our limited funds around. We plan to make available a limited set of matrix codes in 2026. So these are the infrastructure, community facility, and housing activity only matrix codes. So no public services, no planning, and no housing programs or economic development programs for 2026. And I'll explain when we plan to bring some of those back. We also plan to make the number of activities limited to one activity per jurisdiction with a maximum award amount of $5 million. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our plan at the moment is that in 2027, we would repeat the method of distribution for 2026. And we will tweak it if we see something that really is problematic that needs to be changed. But barring anything major, we would plan to do another cycle of approximately $27 million in 2027 for infrastructure and public facility only projects. And then in 2028, bring back housing and economic development programs, planning and public services, and those would be available competitively. And so we would collect information. We'll collect feedback from all of you on exactly how we would make that all available as we get closer to that time. Next slide, please. So I do want to talk to you a little bit about the why behind these changes. So the first is our reason for pausing on housing and economic development programs for 2026 and 2027 is that we did an evaluation of all of the closeouts of 2028 and later awards. And those closeouts indicate that our housing rehab programs, our home ownership programs, and our economic development programs are the three activity types with the highest rate of disencumbrances. And in the email that was sent out, there was a data table that showed the numbers that we ran for this. So what we determined would be a good strategy to improve performance on these activity types was to allow grantees to apply for these programs this year under the current NOFA. And this is another reason where we're letting you know that this is happening now so you can plan, is that you would apply in 2025 and again in 2028, but give you the interim years to just focus on expenditures and performance and any program modifications that you need to do to get your existing funding expended. And then the other element that we are pausing is pausing planning and public services for 2026 and 2027. Again, we want to have grantees focus on expending existing awards. We also are letting you know now as a signal that we're doing this, that these are eligible under 2025. So if you know that you're going to have planning and public services needs, please do apply for them now. There's no guarantee of funding. It is all competitive, but this is the time to do it. And then we will fund these again in 2028. But 2026 and 2027 are going to our goal is to focus on larger infrastructure projects, allowing our staff to spend more time on TA and monitoring, which we are obligated to do with HUD. Because the staff will have a smaller contract management workload. This change also responds to reduced congressional appropriations and feedback from all of you that the availability of federal and state resources for infrastructure and community facilities is limited, and the construction costs continue to go up. This change allows for expenditure of existing planning and public services awards and an opportunity to come in back for these types of awards in 2028. And we recognize this is a big shift. I'm guessing this is where we'll get the most negative feedback, but this is why we're letting you know now so you can plan accordingly for what you want to prioritize for your applications in the 2025 NOFA. And the next, thank you for moving to the next slide. We are returning to over the counter and a first come, first serve basis. And the guidelines are changing to apply the 50% rule to over the counter projects. Now, we did explore the idea of setting some priorities around that would kind of prioritize within over the counter based on poverty or LMA or LMH, but we really decided that you all have your own local prioritization and that you do at the local level. And that's one of the really big values of CDBG. So we decided that instead we would we'd propose a set aside for grantees who haven't been awarded recently. So in the last 5 years, and we would also change the guidelines to apply the 50% rule to over the counter projects. This creates space for lower capacity or underserved grantees or grantees who just haven't come in a long time to be awarded in the 2026 round, while still ensuring that other applications will be approved based on their readiness and that they pass threshold. And then those grantees can enter into standard agreements and on an as received basis until our funds are exhausted. The application of the 50% rule is going to reward faster spenders and ensure grantees who haven't spent down their existing awards continue to focus on expenditures rather than applying for new awards before they're ready, because we do see that as being a challenge in program implementation. So that concludes my presentation on the method of distribution. I've been talking and looking at my PowerPoint, so I haven't had a chance to look at the Q&A. So I can look at that now, and if there's a lot, I might ask for some help in navigating it. We may not be able to respond to everything, but we'll give it our best shot. So I will take a look at the Q&A, unless Tanner, I
We
just
just have one more slide, Felicity,
oh
and
I
that's
did.
just,
Oh, sorry. Thank
oh,
you.
no, it's okay. We just have one more slide to plug the 2026 office hours. And that link has been in the chat or is now in the chat. And then it's just going to open up to Q&A. So Felicity,
Great.
would you like me to read the questions
Yeah, that was
or,
great. Thank you.
okay, let's start at the top. Um, Beth Dodd, can you please provide the slides for this presentation for our review? Yes, we can. Uh, Brandy Caparaso, will points be given to those jurisdictions who have completed their 20A asterisk grants and are shovel ready for 26-27, so they're not in jeopardy of paying back their 20A asterisk funding? Susan?
Sure. Thanks for that question, Brandy. That's a good question. Actually, when someone submits a request for a 28 asterisk funding, one of the questions is that we're asking what the contingency plan is in case you do not receive, the jurisdiction doesn't receive a future grant from CDBG. So we're hoping that folks are taking that into consideration when you are requesting a 28 asterisk grant. So unfortunately, no points, extra points will be given. This 28 asterisk funding is an HCD creation for us to be able to help, smaller jurisdictions who maybe don't have the option of being able to get themselves shovel ready. So it's kind of something that we've been testing out in order to help smaller jurisdictions, but unfortunately is not going to get extra scores to be able to come in and make that more competitive for them. So I would caution everyone to take a look at the Appendix F, that is the scoring matrix for those kind of scoring questions. And if you are interested in submitting for approval for a planning related to another activity, there on page 23 and 24 of the NOFA, there is some detailed information on how that works and what we're looking for, and when requests need to be submitted, which is 14 calendar days prior to the opening date of the application opening date. So there's some really good information there. And if you want some further particulars, details on it, you feel free to go to the unit inbox and ask those questions there, and we can kind of have a discussion about what you're thinking about coming in for and how we can possibly assist to get you what you need to be able to do it. But To answer this question, unfortunately, there jurisdictions that have completed their 20A asterisk grants and are shovel ready are not going to get extra points for it, but we can work with you. You know, we want to avoid a payback too. So on an individual case by case basis, we can work with you to find a solution for it, you know, if you fall into that situation. So please don't hesitate to reach out to the unit inbox and we'll discuss what our options are and get you what you need. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Susan. Next question. Happy to see, or okay, statement. Happy to see OTC is back. Set-asides are great. Can those in set-asides still use consultants to help? Susan.
Sure. Thanks for that question, Anonymous. We don't have any prohibition on using consultants to help. In fact, we encourage it if that's something that you can consider based on your budgets and other things. So yeah, we're not going to prohibit using consultants to help with the OTC set-asides.
Thank you. Beth Dodd. 5 million, that is high. Are you going to also require us to have other funding in the project? Mamie.
Thank you, Tanner. Beth, thank you for the question. For infrastructure project, 5 million, based on our experience of dealing with our grantees, that's not as high as you think, based on the need and the cost that has went up. So we have taken that in consideration and increased it to 5 million. But no, at this moment, we are not requiring for you to have other funding in the project, but we highly encourage it because CDBG is always a gap funding type of program. So we do encourage it, but we're not going to make it required at this moment.
And just to
Thank you,
piggyback
Mamie.
off of that, Mamie, you do not have to request 5 million. That's the maximum. So if you don't need 5 million, highly encourage you to just request what you need for your
Thank you.
project.
Yeah. Eliminating public services will be a big impact on many communities. Felicity.
Thank you for the feedback. And we knew we were going to hear this for sure. And that is why we wanted to make sure we signal this as early as we could so that grantees can put in their applications for 2025. And then, you know, and we're also signaling that we will make funds available again in 2028 so that you can plan to the degree possible. These funds are always made available on a competitive basis, and it's limited to 15% of the CDBG dollars. So unfortunately, a reliance on CDBG for public services is not a sustainable model, and we are and that's hard to say that, but it is true. So we understand that will have an impact, and it's why we're doing our best to signal that that we are going to be pausing on that.
Thank you, Felicity. Brandy asks, Felicity, did you state that home rehab and economic development contracts may be extended if there is a risk of not fully expending the current contracts?
No, that's not what I said, Brandy. I just was indicating that the not having to scramble to try to apply for those programs and put, you know, to add more money to an existing pot should allow grantees to focus on expenditures of existing awards.
Thank you. Brandy also says, I believe this will eliminate all extremely small rural jurisdictions funding in 26 and 27. The reason for this is that 20A asterisk funding has no guarantee of future funding for the construction, and they cannot risk paying back that grant if construction is not begun within the 5-year time frame. In addition, they do not have funds to conduct planning for shovel-ready projects ahead of time. My understanding is that in the far past, plan specs and NEPA were included in the construction grants. Would that be a consideration? Felicity.
Let me try to unpack the multiple parts of this question, Randy. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the feedback that this is going to make it tough for extremely small rural jurisdictions. So I understand that 20A asterisk funding is no guarantee of future funding for construction. We made it available to respond to the fact that small rural jurisdictions often do not have cash available to front those costs. And in response to your question, your understanding of that in the far past, plans and specs and NEPA were included in construction grants. How we make that available now is on a pre-award cost reimbursement basis. We had to move after our HUD audit. We had to move in the direction of shovel-ready projects because we were so slow at expending our funds that we had findings, and we were considered in bad standing as a performer with HUD. We are now in good standing in terms of our ranking as a performer, but we have to maintain that. We have to have projects apply when they are shovel ready. And so we've put out there, as Susan mentioned, some tools to aid with that. One is the 20A asterisk opportunity, and the other is ensuring that there's a path for grantees to put pre-award costs in their sources and uses and seek reimbursement if awarded funds. But as a $27 million program, there just isn't always going to be a guarantee of availability of CDBG as a resource for all projects. So that's the response to that question. Unless Mamie or Susan, do you have anything else to respond to Brandy that I didn't say?
No, I think you.
Yeah, you covered it.
Covered
Yeah,
it.
you covered it. Yes.
All right. Thank you. And I appreciate all this feedback. Thank you. We understand that this is not easy, and we have to make hard choices. So I appreciate hearing about the impacts, and it doesn't. And we will take all this into consideration and thought. But there's reasons behind what we're doing, and I'm just trying to explain those. Thanks, Brandy.
Can you increase the amount available to grantees for public services with the elimination of available funding in the next two NOFA periods? Susan?
Sure. We don't have plans to do that, increasing the available amount for public services, but that is good feedback on what we're talking about here. So if you don't mind, Anonymous, if you could send this feedback and this question to the CDBG inbox, these are all things that we're going to be evaluating. And I think this is a really good suggestion that we'll discuss internally. So when you have these kinds of ideas or options, please send them to the unit inbox. We are welcoming all of that feedback as we make these decisions and try to make it a good situation for everybody. So thank you for that. It's a good one.
And go ahead.
Sorry, we were probably thinking the same thing. Just to add to that, Susan, as of right now, there doesn't seem a way that we can do that because we are subject to a cap on our public services. We have a percentage that we cannot go over. So I don't see that as a conversation for us to entertain changing the amounts available because with the limit that we have now, we're limited to so many applications, and this will decrease the amount of applications that we can take if we increase the amount. So I don't see it that as anything that we can have a conversation or entertain because it's set for public services.
And I'll just piggyback on that further that Mamie's correct. And if we were going to do something where we had it, where we made it higher in some years and non-existent in others years, that would actually require a conversation with HUD. So we have put that on the table as a potential conversation with HUD, but we wouldn't be able to do that without their blessing. So more to come on that, but we have to be very careful to not exceed caps because then we're in a repayment situation, as Mamie indicated.
Thank you, everyone. Jeff Lucas asks, why do you think the ED and housing activities are underspent compared to other activities? Is it capacity? Any insights from your perspective would be helpful for future planning.
I can speak on the housing. The feedback that I received regarding the housing programs is because of the housing stock that is available, that is not available for a lot of first-time home buyers. Some feedback that I receive on the housing rehab is that some of the guidelines that's out there does require for the homeowner to have some type of lien per se on the property. So that kind of deters them from moving forward with the housing rehab program. So for housing, it has a lot to do with the housing stock and the prices right now is a lot of feedback that we're receiving. And I don't know if anyone want to chime in on economic development.
I would, Mamie. Sorry about that. Hi, Jeff. So to kind of piggyback on what Mamie had said, some of the stuff that we are seeing, at least with for economic development, I think has to do with the experience that is required to run an economic development program. And then for housing, we have some of these other programs that are, for the first time home buyers, sometimes it's, trying to help them buy down the interest rates. And with interest rates being really high, it's not enough. So I'm hoping with time, maybe that'll turn around. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they want to add from the team.
Or if any of the grantees have any
Other,
experience with those programs, they're more than welcome to put in the Q&A to kind of let Jeff know what their experience. We open that as well for you to share.
thanks, Mamie.
Jim Robbins asks, do current VA or housing programs count as OTC or as competitive programs? Felicity.
I'll do my best to answer this question, and if I'm wrong, correct me, team. So under the 2024 NOFA, those came in as over the counter, but under 2025, we don't have any over the counter. Everything is competitive. Everything is scored. So we did change it this last year. And we're signaling that we would bring this back in 2028. And I think we'll see how it works as competitive this year and decide on that at a later time. So as in the 2025 NOFA, business assistance and housing programs are competitive.
Thanks, Felicity. Louise Collis asks, since planning grants and public services will not be allowed for 2 years, would HCD consider allowing the use of PI for these activities during this period? Shannon?
Hi, Louise. So from my understanding, and again, I know Mike should be on the call as well as Felicity. The reason that we cannot allow PI to be used for planning and public services also has to do with the cap. So I don't think that we would be able to be in a position to allow PI to be used for either one of those, even with that gap for the 2 years.
Yeah, if we were going, that's correct, Shannon. And if we were going to use it, we'd have to limit it in some way because we couldn't, because I'm assuming everybody would want to come in for planning and PI, and it has to be that it's limited to the limit is actually it's complex. The limit is on our expenditures, so it's what we expend in a given year. So the easiest way to track all of that is just to limit the applications to 10% or 15% annually to ensure that we don't go over the caps. So if anyone has a brilliant way in which they could propose that we do that, that we make that available in a limited way then we could perhaps do that. But it would be I think we're trying to keep things simple, and it would be difficult, and if we don't want to add any more complications. So the easy answer is no, but thanks for the question. And if somebody proposes a brilliant way to make that work, we can entertain it.
I know, just to add to that, I know over the years since I've been here, we have tried to figure out a way, but unfortunately it provides a disadvantage because since we are subject to a cap, and someone comes in using program income, it limits what we can offer with grant funds and program income for anybody else coming behind asking for the same request. So I think that's with us, trying to think of a way. We just don't want it to make it an unfair advantage of just only having one or two grantees that is eligible for, using program income for those activities.
Thank you, everyone. Beth asks, can you give us any idea of dates or timeframes for when the 26 and 2027 NOFA would be released? Tentative, of course. Felicity?
Glad you clarified as tentative, Beth. I believe the team discussed a late summer or fall for 2026. I don't want to predict yet for 2027.
Thank you. Louise asks, the NOFA points for match funds provide no explanation of what can be considered as match. Any guidance on this topic? Susan.
Sure. So what we're looking for is when you do your when you submit your application, if you've got other funding that you're including, maybe from another grant, maybe from internal, whatever that is, we're going to be scoring on a ratio. So we don't really have any kind of guidance necessarily on what you're using. We're just looking for whether or not you are commingling some funds with CDBG and other funds, so that you're showing that it is being used as intended for gap funding. It's not a requirement, but we are offering points for that to encourage jurisdictions to, kind of think bigger picture and bring in other funding that actually helps for projects to be more likely to not have to disencumber and to complete on time and in budget and all of that. So that's what's on there, but we don't really have any requirements or, necessarily any kind of extra points or anything that would be given for particular types of funding match. And it's not really a funding match. We're just looking for folks to be thinking about bringing in other options for funding onto your projects as intended for CDBG. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot to share on that, but if you have specific questions on it, please go to the unit inbox and we can have a discussion on what that might look like for what you're proposing particularly.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any consideration in asking HUD to reduce public service cap so that jurisdictions can use CDBG PI for public services or planning? Felicity.
The cap is regulatory, so it would have to be an advocacy. Actually, yeah, it is regulatory, not statutory. It would have to be an advocacy campaign to change that for all of the states.
Thank you, Felicity. Brandy asks, I would like to know how other small jurisdictions get their projects shovel ready. Thank you, Brandy. If you want to share your email address with the chat, I'm sure some jurisdictions would be like to talk to you. Thank you. It's always seemed like a big risk to me that a jurisdiction has to expend so many resources to be ready for a CDBG application, especially shovel ready, with no guarantee that funding will come. It seems more logical to apply for funding to make a project shovel ready. Does any part of HCD offer that? Susan.
Sure, that's a really good question. And back to the previous question about the 28 asterisk planning related to another activity, that is our creative way of trying to help assist with getting folks shovel ready. We need folks to be shovel ready because the grant is only 3 years long. And if we're waiting for, everything to be, if we don't require that certain things be ready to go, then we end up with just a bunch of disencumbrances or amendments, and it just becomes a big hassle for folks. And it is something that if we're requiring of the shovel ready, then we do have more likely for folks to be able to complete their projects. So this is why we have the 28 and the 28 asterisk, is to help folks get ready. So if you have a jurisdiction that doesn't have the resources to spend to get those bid ready plans and specs and the things they need to be shovel ready, please reach out to the unit inbox and we can have a discussion on how we can support you and get what you need to be able to come in shovel ready for an application. That's what we are always trying to attempt. This is something on our radar all the time, that we're always going to be looking for creative ways to get folks what they need to be able to come in successfully. So please reach out to the unit inbox with your specifics and we'll direct you and do the best we can to help you get there.
Yeah. I just wanted to add what Felicity said earlier. This was one of our findings. They're not performing properly. So as people who's been here for a while, we used to just give you a grant agreement and allow you to do your get your NEPA done within that contract period. But unfortunately, since there's sometimes hangups on, environmental reviews and things and getting permits and getting shovel ready, we have found that, back in 2017, that a lot of grantees went through their whole contract with trying to get ready for the infrastructure project, which reflected on our performance, which hence we received findings regarding it. So we understand we did it at one point. It was not successful. So this is seemed to be successful for us since we're not on the radar as much with HUD regarding our performance. We understand we have done it before, but unfortunately, it was not successful. So I just wanted to add that to kind of stress what Felicity said earlier about HUD.
Thank you both. Bambi Klein asks, were the caps for 2025 and 2028 also up to $5 million? Felicity?
So the 2025 NOFA is out right now, and the activity limits are found on page 14 of the NOFA, and I can put that in the chat. Public services limitations are up to 300,000. Planning is up to 300,000. Projects are, the limit is up to $3.3 million. So specific to the type of activity you're talking about, it's a $3.3 million limitation in this year's NOFA. Programs, which is housing programs and economic development programs, the limit is up to $1.5 million per program. And the limit per grantee is $3.6 million. For 2028, we have not yet established those limits.
Thank you. Please no due dates during holidays.
Anonymous.
Shannon?
So good news is that there are no due dates during the holidays. Our application submission period opens in February of 2026. So between now and February, this is the opportunity to email our unit inbox with any questions that you may have on a potential project, or if you are working with a assigned specialist or CDBG representative, this is the time to ask them questions.
Thank you.
And the feedback is noted for future NOFAs. Thank you.
Does the removal of planning public services housing programs from the 26-27 NOFAs prevent entitlement jurisdictions from spending their allocation on those activities? Felicity.
Thank you for the question, anonymous attendee. Our method of distribution, the state of California's Department of Housing and Community Development's method of distribution does not impact the planning at all for entitlement jurisdictions. Entitlement jurisdictions receive their own allocations of funds from HUD directly and submit their own plans for HUD on how to expend those dollars. So our planning does not impact the expenditure limits at all for entitlement jurisdictions.
Thank you. Jeff asks, if a jurisdiction wants to apply to use its PI for ED or housing in 26-27, would that be allowed?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Brandy asks, are you finding that small jurisdictions not applying for 28 asterisk due to the issue of paying back the grant if no construction is done within 5 years? Susan?
Yeah, we haven't seen that to be an issue so far, but we do have some options. It's very project program specific, depends on what you're doing. So if you are worried about the issue of paying back, please email the unit inbox, give us some specifics, and we can discuss what options there might be. We do have some creative things we've been discussing. This is a new implementation, so we're kind of, flying the plane while we build it on some of these issues, but we do have options, but they are case specific. So if you are worried about the payback situation, please email the unit inbox and we can discuss case by case what that might look like.
Thank you. Louise says, just my opinion, but encouraging subsidy layering points for match makes projects more difficult to complete and takes longer to get off the ground. It can hamper efforts to move funding more quickly. Thank you for your feedback, Louise. Uh, Janet Reese asks, my concern with OTC's maximum of 5 million means the first five, maybe six applicants will be funded, with funding likely running out within the first hour or so of the portal being open. Felicity?
I'll answer that. Yes, Janet, that is likely what will happen. That is what we anticipate happening. That's why the reason that we did two things was to counter this to some degree. It will not fully be countered. But the part of this will be that we're going to put a set aside out for up to two grantees who haven't come in the last 5 years. So these are likely grantees who missed that opportunity when this happened in, say, 2023, when this was the case. Those grantees could come in and have a moment to get their application ready and not have to be the first one to press the button. The other limiting factor that we're placing on this is that we are requiring that grantees we're applying the 50% rule to all project types, including over the counter. We're modifying the guidelines. So that will mean that if grantees have been slow to spend on their existing infrastructure or public facility awards, they will not be eligible to come in for an award in 2026. They'll have to wait till 2027 when they're further along. So those are the guardrails we've put around that phenomenon. But yes, that will happen. But the eligibility for grantees will rotate based on whether they've come in the last 5 years.
And to
Thanks,
add to that,
Felicity.
Felicity, that's always been the case when you have an OTC, no matter if it's a $5 million max or 3.3. 27 million for our rural communities of California is really not enough to be able to allow a long list of applicants to get awarded, unfortunately. So that has been a topic of conversation over the years I've been here, but unfortunately, that is our allocation every year. I haven't heard any talk of increasing that allocation or anything like that, but unfortunately, if it's a $5 million max or 3.3, that OTC goes quick, very, very quick. So I completely understand your concern on that.
And I will say one more thing. Another reason for making it $5 million is so that jurisdictions who are able to successfully be awarded can apply for those high impact projects that they haven't otherwise had the resources to complete. So we have various policy goals, and so this is how we're going to attempt to meet them these cycles.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Jessica Ing asks, do you do one-on-one? If so, I'd like to request one for this year to better understand CDBG resources and how applicants can use them effectively. Thank you. Shannon.
Hi, Jessica. If possible, could you please email our CDBG unit inbox so that way we can kind of get some more information and then find out which jurisdiction you're with and things like that. So that would be the best.
Thank you. At this point, we have 5 minutes left in the office hours, so I would like to say if we don't get to your question, please email our inbox at cdbg@hcd.ca.gov. We'll be happy to help you. Our next question, hello, I have no experience with this funding, and I'm wondering if an allowable use of the funds could be the modernization of athletic facilities for our school district. Shannon.
Hi, Anonymous. Just like the last answer I gave, please email our CDBG unit inbox so that way we can get some more information from you. And then we can kind of have conversations about it.
Thank you. Brandy says, every jurisdiction in Siskiyou County I work with find the 28 asterisk as a poison pill and will not apply for the funding. Susan?
Sure. Thanks for that feedback, Brandy. I appreciate it. Again, we have some creative options case by case. So it really isn't a poison pill. It's meant to help for folks to get to get prepared to be able to come in for a project. So happy to discuss, would happy to talk to, we could have a meeting with Siskiyou County jurisdictions that might be considering it, that are concerned about it. And we can kind of give some details based on projects they're thinking about doing and maybe give a really good comprehensive, have a discussion on how they could use it. It's really meant to help and not be a poison pill. So I encourage jurisdictions that are considering that or interested in it. We're happy to, hold a meeting, do it in email exchange, whatever's the best for folks to try to give some good information so it isn't so frightening to come in on a 28 asterisk. That's not our intent to make that be a scary thing. So please, I encourage you to have Siskiyou County jurisdictions that are interested reach out to us, and we'll have a meeting and kind of go over some of the options. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Brandy, for the feedback. Anonymous attendee. Have you considered the 2-year funding process and doing the OTC over that period to reduce the impacts in putting applications together over and over again with such a limited amount of funding? Felicity.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we did consider a 2-year funding process. And in fact, when we first were talking through this new method of distribution, that's what we laid out. But as we started to think about the history of OTC projects in the CDBG program, we realized that what this can do is we only get our 2026 allocation, and then we get our 2027 allocation, and we can't pre-commit funds before we get them from HUD. And so if we were to make a 2-year funding process, what would happen is that grantees that were at the bottom of the line would have to wait to get funding, and as in our current economic climate where construction costs just continue to rise and rise, the funding that they applied for, the budget that they submitted would all become quickly outdated, as would their audit reports, their SAM.gov registration. So what we decided was to just signal that we are going to rinse and repeat over 2 years. And so grantees, if they don't commit, if they are not awarded in 2026 because they missed the opportunity window, they can refresh the information that they provided without a lot of effort and resubmit in 2027. So that was our thought process around not deciding against doing a 2-year cycle.
No wait list, just to add to that.
Yeah, we
No
tried
wait.
that wait list in 2019, and these are some of the hiccups that we ran into, and it just doesn't seem feasible. You end up having to do a new application anyway because of all the things that Felicity just mentioned. So it ends up being double work and with some level of expectation that maybe can't be met. So I think what we're coming up with is a way to kind of address some of those things.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Jeff Lucas agrees with the idea. Good idea, Anonymous. These applications are very time consuming to prepare for small jurisdictions to complete. Thank you, Jeff, for your feedback. That was the last question. So it is now 11, and at this point, we're going to end the webinar, but I hope everyone has a happy holiday and very restful, relaxing, and enjoying that there are no CDBG deadlines during that period. So we appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.